I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates Meanakimes.
All right, so first play we're going to look at 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everyone? Tayler Kyles here for CLNS Media, coming at you with another episode of Pat's Daily, brought to you by our good friends at PrizePicks. And today, I'm joined by friend of the show, Andre Weingarten, who recently released one of the most impressive roster breakdowns I have ever seen. Very thorough look at the Patriots roster, grades, scouting reports, really phenomenal. I know you, for whatever reason, you crazy MFer, made it public for everybody to see. No one has to pay a single dime. So while I may not be as altruistic as you are, my friend, you are a man of the people. I'm really excited for more people to get eyes on this. And I wanted to have you on so I could get your perspective on it, some questions that I had for the people, and also just plug this thing away because you did such a great job, and I know how long you spent putting it together. So before we get into your masterpiece, man, thank you so much for coming back. How the hell are you after this monumentous undertaking for a team that was not easy to watch last season, might I add?
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for having me. I'm finally catching up on my sleep. I spent about, between work and that, 16 to 18 hours a day for about a month, working on that and work. So I didn't have a life. I didn't do anything besides that basically for the entire time period. So past few days, because it released five-ish days ago, I've been able to sleep a little bit this weekend for the first time in a while. It's been very nice.
Very happy to hear it, buddy. And I can see the effects of that beauty sleep. You look well rested. Now, I will ask, before we get into the actual breakdown, obviously, new regime for the Patriots, right?
Yep.
So I am curious, what do you think about what Mike Vrabel has done so far as new head coach of the Patriots? Now, of course, very early on, I know you've been grinding away at this. I know you haven't gotten to really dive into the free agent additions, but whatever you can share, because we're not really going to touch on those during the show,
Right.
The free agents, Mike Vrabel, anything new about this Patriots team before we take a look back as a way of also kind of looking forward?
Yeah, I think the first thing is very much familiarity, right? Across the board, they wanted to bring in veteran players and a veteran staff in general that they knew they could rely upon and go out there and be in the right places at the right time. I think that's something that young players struggle with, right? When it comes to option routes, when it comes to match coverages, when it comes to really just assignment sound football in general. So getting guys that are team leaders, that are high quality players, or that raise the floor of the roster just inherently by being there, I think those are players that they gravitated to, right? Just some of the names off the top of my head, right? You have Harold Landry, who, as a pass rusher, just inherently, I'm not a huge, I don't think he has played up to his statistical output. But as a run defender, as a team leader, like they're very good qualities there. Vrabel, very high on him, makes a lot of sense. Robert Spillane worked with Josh McDaniels, worked with Mike Vrabel, right? So there's a connectivity there. Another leader, special teamer turned linebacker, Mac Hollins, special teamer turned wide receiver, right? So you see a lot of common themes with who they're bringing in. And then you see Milton Williams, tremendous talent up the middle. You solidify that, one, in case Christian Barmore doesn't come back to form because of his very real serious health issue, or you pair him with Christian Barmore, which is a terrifying proposition for teams. And then you have Carlton Davis, who is a really competitive player who worked with the defensive coordinator now of the Detroit Lions, or from the Detroit Lions. And that's just another piece of the puzzle. He's a very competitive player. I know that, I think it was you who shared the clip of Jamar Chase saying that Carlton Davis is the best corner that he's faced in the league.
Yeah.
So
that was a while ago. We will be fair. That was like early in the Tampa days, but at the same time, still very impressive. I don't care how old you are if Jamar Chase is giving you that kind of praise.
Right. Exactly. So it's like, it's a little propaganda in there, but if that's your number two corner with his competitiveness and his play, I think that's obviously of great value. So they basically looked at a lot of the holes and they started really heavily on the defense, which I think in general, you can't turn around a whole roster in a month, especially in a light free agency period, relatively speaking. So for them, it made a lot of sense to really target and strengthen one side of the ball while trying to fill some of the gaps on the other.
And honestly, for agency, as someone who did have to kind of do the deep dive into who was available, it wasn't that exciting. Defense was the only side where you're thinking, even if some of the big players are off the board that you might expect, there's still going to be some potential difference makers. And for a team like the Patriots, Spillane is a difference maker. Carlton Davis is a difference maker. Whereas on some other teams, maybe, and I think on this team, they will be role players, helps when you get Milton Williams, right? That's the one where you're saying this brings it together, where when he was off the board, I was pretty distraught. Like, right. Obviously, I try to find the positive side, but it really did feel like if you lose out on him, you're not getting one of these slam dunk offensive options. So at least they managed to solidify that spot.
Right.
One thing though, when it comes to the grading system for your roster, I want to start to transition into that.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Now, there's a lot of depth here. Not only are you covering guys who are on the team, but you have one for draft picks as well. Also, you acknowledge when there are some areas in players' profiles that go beyond just the grades, right? There's also, all right, what's this player's trajectory? What does his health look like? And we both have our own little depth charts. I stole your grading scale. I've been working on one for years and was like, why am I killing myself? This is someone who has experience. It makes perfect sense. And it's honestly really helped me. So on top of just, quality players, blue chips, and all that, let people know what some of the other elements are and why they're so important to your process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the foundation is that I've studied a lot of different grading charts over the years. I took some elements from the old school Baltimore Ravens grading system. I took some things from the Scouting Academy grading system. I took some things from Sports Management Worldwide. Someone who worked with the Rams, his grading system. And I kind of combined those elements into what felt like the most comprehensive system and maintained a common scale. So I work on a 1 to 7 scale where 4 and above is a starting caliber trait or player for the pro game. College game is a very different discussion, but that's the idea that if you're at a certain level in an area, you should be able to compete with every other player who is in that area, and you should dominate everyone who's below it. So that's kind of how that works. And then the higher up you go, you might have reps where you can compete with higher, but you're not consistently competing with them. And that's kind of the 1 to 7. If you're a 3 or lower, that means that you're a replacement level player or a backup or a practice squad caliber player or just not an NFL player, depending on how low it goes. So that's the foundation of the 1 to 7. Then you have obviously the health, which I tried to condense into that you've missed at least 4 games in 2 of the previous 3 seasons or suffered a career-threatening injury. So the idea would be that this player has shown significant durability concerns, that they are not, it's not just a fluke thing, right? If you break your fibula and you miss the first 4 games of one season, you miss the last 4 games of the previous, that doesn't really count because that's that's the recovery cycle. But if you break your fibula and then you break your collarbone, it's like, those could be fluky things, but maybe you have some bone weakness. If it's a bunch of soft tissue things, that's a huge red flag because that just means that your anatomy is a little bit susceptible to this type of injury. Cooper Kupp was one of those players that worried me in that regard. Obviously not a member of the Patriots, but someone that we had been discussing. Both you and I, and then obviously the media and the fans have been discussing. He has missed substantial time every season. I think he's only played like 1 or 2 full seasons in his career.
I think so, yeah.
So, it's a lot of soft tissue things. It's a sprained ankle. It's a lot of ligament, soft tissue injuries that you're just susceptible to. I'm susceptible to it. Like I know it's
humans,
it's just an anatomy thing. So that's part of it. Contract, APY exceeds their talent level. So the idea is that I have a general baseline of what players are making per each talent level, each grade. So if you're a 5, which is a quality starter, your APY for your position should be here. And if it's here, then you have an outsized contract, which for a team like the Patriots at this stage does not matter as much. But in the grand scheme of things, it would matter if you were, say, the Saints or if you were Buffalo, when you have a massive quarterback contract and you have to be creative with your cap. So just acknowledging that someone is being paid more than they are playing at it's just a note at that point. And then it's the trends for what this player could be in the future. because scouting in general is not about what you've done before. It's what you're going to do in the future.
Right.
Right. You don't make decisions. You don't sign players based off their past performance. If you do, you're doing it backwards, and you usually pay the price for it pretty quickly. Trending down, usually guys who are approaching 30 or have surpassed 30, and you can start to see some physical decline in their game. Players who you knew were a little bit more athletic, and you see some more stiffness, you see them decline by the end of the season.
Mhm.
That's the big one. Guys who are older can look the part weeks 1 through 8, usually. It's that back half of that season that you see that massive drop off in especially skill players. You can see it in quarterbacks. Drew Brees was my classic case study. Kirk Cousins. By the time that they hit 300 in-game pass attempts, their arms fell off. Happened to Drew Brees the final 3 years of his career. It happened to Peyton Manning in 2015. Happened to Peyton Manning actually in 2014, a little bit earlier, a little bit later than that. Happened to Kirk Cousins last year. It was literally he went into that final game that he started at 292 pass attempts, and his arm fell off a cliff in that game. So because think about how many pass attempts you have in camp and everything. That number is probably closer to 800, 900 in a calendar year. But so that's where you see that fall. Players who don't have any significant growth, usually it's that their processing is already in a pretty good spot, or they have not improved in their processing 4 or 5 years into their career. Their technique is in a good spot. If their technique is in a good spot and they are at the level they are, they're probably not getting a lot better because they have reached basically the cap of their coaching and their improvement in that regard. And then there's some athleticism concerns there for some guys that you might say, oh, this guy doesn't have the very good foot speed to play on the outside at corner, wide receiver, or whatever, but he's technically sound. You don't want to put him in every matchup. He's not going to get better, but he can perform. And then growth is anything that can be improved through time on task or coaching.
Mhm.
So the processing, the technique, the feel for a position if you haven't played it before, moving wide receiver to slot, outside wide receiver to slot, or moving on the offensive line, left guard to right guard, left guard to center, like we'll talk about later with somebody. Moving from a 3-4 to 4-3, 2-point stance, 3-point stance. Mike to Will, even that, being a communicator when you haven't been before. Anything that you might have that is a traditional change in position or additional responsibility. If you are new to it, I give you a little bit of grace if you're within those buckets of, oh, they're not already technically sound in this regard, or the processing isn't there.
I'm still stuck on 300 attempts. I'm not going to lie. That's a very fun stat, and one that hopefully Patriots fans will not have to worry about for quite some time, because they will be led by Drake Maye this season, the official full-time starter of the New England Patriots, unlike this time last season when the quarterback position was completely up in the air. Now, you have Drake Maye as a quality starter on your roster. Now, in my most recent depth chart, I actually bumped him down to fringe only because I felt like he just didn't show enough as a rookie, just because they didn't win anything, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, at the quarterback position, winning does matter because you are in so much control. So I'm curious. Obviously, everyone was excited about what Drake Maye showed last season. Last couple games or his last couple performances, rather. He didn't really play a full game in that last one.
Right.
They were unfortunate relative to the rest of the season, but still showed plenty for people to get excited about and expect him to take a pretty significant jump next year, hopefully with a better supporting cast around him. But why did you have him as a quality starter so soon? And what's something that you like to see from him in terms of growth moving forward in 2025?
Yeah. So the first thing is, I've studied a lot of quarterbacks just across the league in general, and there were very few, being maybe 10 to 12, that I felt like were as on time with their progressions and their throws as Drake Maye. And I think that's the part of it, right? Like, there is conviction in his game of what he is seeing and his ability to get the ball to his receiver, whether they catch it or not. And I think that's part of it, right? Like, there's a level here of results versus process. And process leads to good results or bad results. Results can be from anything, right? They can be chaotic. Process usually trends towards a certain area. So for Drake, his process and his foundation, his athletic ability, his arm strength, his poise, his competitive toughness, his leadership, they are all tremendous assets that set his floor. As a processor, he does a lot of really good things well. He handled the blitz with good awareness. He was very good in the quick game. He attacks leverage. He protects his receivers. He throws a very good deep ball on the outside. He knows when a play is just dead to rights, and he'll either scramble or he'll throw it away or he'll do all sorts of things. But I think those are the types of strengths and foundation for him that I'm like, wow, if he had anyone that he could just on the outside just say, oh, it's 3rd and 4, you're getting the ball. Like, I think that would have changed the perception of him because everything else was so good, but he also was indiscriminate in who he targeted, which is a thing that I really love about quarterbacks, where they don't need to lock on to somebody to make a play.
Fun story about that, actually. So we got some context for that. I was watching a video from one of his old coaches. I think the Patriots actually released something where he talked about how Drake, when he was in high school, would keep track of who hadn't caught a ball yet. Like, he'd come over to the stat sheet and be like, oh, has this guy, have I thrown him a pass? No. And go out of his way to make sure that guy got the ball. And that's not just a good guy thing, because I asked him about it during the season, and it's something that he still is conscientious of, not just because, you want to keep everyone happy to a degree. You can't, obviously, as a quarterback, but you also want to make sure that you're not keying in on someone and making it too obvious who you're going to throw to. Now, if you have Calvin Johnson on the outside, doesn't really matter if everybody knows where the ball is going to go. Right. But I think in certain situations like the Patriots are in, where you don't really have a go-to guy, it's smart to be conscientious and know, okay, if everyone's got 3 targets, that keeps the field open for me, at least, and it doesn't give the defense any kind of advantage in certain key situations.
Yes, absolutely. And I think Hunter Henry was the closest thing to that guy for him. Consistent chain mover, found soft spots in the zone in a way that I think only Kendrick Bourne on the outside was able to do consistently. And obviously he was kind of rotating in. He had missed time coming off the ACL. He wasn't the same athlete. But I think those are the positives. Now, the areas of growth that you asked about, I think the first one is that his field vision narrows a little bit on those deep posts.
Yeah.
So deep routes over the middle. He sees a guy. He wants to take a shot. He puts a lot of faith in his guys. The anticipation, based on when he loads up, they have not beaten their men on those throws, let alone the backside coverage, which got him in trouble in the Tennessee game. You could argue that maybe they need to make a little bit better play on the ball. It was a bad decision. Yeah. Good coverage, very good coverage, because I think the receiver fell down on the backside of the play, so it didn't pull the safety.
Right.
But that's still one of those things that his eyes can get too big. He wants that shot, and it did not work ever.
Especially at the end of games. That's one of the reasons why if he had one of those comebacks against the Titans, against the Rams, that's where I'm saying, okay, I got the glimpse. It's just like you haven't seen him finish those drives.
He did against the Titans.
Oh, right. Yes. I'm sorry. I was sitting there, man, literally, Mike Reese and I are sitting next to each other like, did that just happen? It was on my birthday, by the way.
Wow.
But if we was able, not his fault, but if they could have closed out that game, that probably would have been the swing for me. But in those late game situations, you do see sometimes he does try to press down the field a little bit.
Yeah. The other is that he got a little passive on early downs. Was a little too quick to not necessarily take a check down, but throw into the flats. Be the extension of the run game in a way that he might have had something if he just held it a tick longer. But his internal clock is good. His base is good, not great right now. There's solid consistency. And then one thing, and I think it's a very small thing, but something I picked up was he corrects his bad habits between drives. He doesn't correct it in the drive. So you could see a drive deteriorate mechanically or in one way or another because he makes a mistake. He panics a little bit, and then it takes him going to the sideline, taking that breath and coming back. If he can do that between downs, that's a huge step. Because there are plenty of guys who can't correct it for a quarter, for a half, for a game, so it's a nitpick, but it's like, if you fix those two things, the base, and then really just not throwing those deep posts in a way that doesn't make a lot of sense, the sky's the limit. I mean, there are probably 12 to 14 quarterbacks who played better than he did last year.
Mm-hmm.
And he was arguably the best quarterback in the rookie class from a quarterback passing perspective. I think Jaden Daniels, from a scrambling, from a results, from a leading the offense way, exceeded him because he was so dynamic as a runner and good as a passer. But I think from a baseline foundation, there's a lot more in Drake Maye's game that can play out long term that he can build upon.
And speaking of scrambling is not everything, right? And you don't want your quarterback to like lead the league in scramble yards. But it was funny with Drake Maye in a bad situation, having not started. It may have actually been once he became the starter. I forget if I had filtered it for the season or not. He lapped every other quarterback but Jaden Daniels in scramble yards. I think Jaden was like 50 or like 100-ish yards away from him. And then it was like Justin Herbert. It was 200 yards. It was third. It really was not close for those two guys. So again, you don't want to see your quarterback having to run for his life for an entire season. But for those guys in situations where they understand that sometimes tucking the ball is more advantageous than trying to just, live to fight another down, it really is impressive that they were able to do this so soon. And just watching Drake, like you said, time on task. Like we watched Mac Jones. We watched Cam Newton. We've seen some bad quarterback play in New England. Even I don't want to call Jacoby Brissett's quarterback play bad necessarily, but just you see when someone looks comfortable, when they're in a rhythm where it feels like they're dictating terms and when they're not thrown off by what the defense is doing. And Drake, for someone who didn't play as long as he did, which helped, I think, like he constantly says, or coaches even say he wouldn't have been the same if we just thrown him out there. But you saw, this kid's prepared. He knows what's coming. He's comfortable, and he's not reacting, both because he's coached the right way. And even as you saw in college, he understands space and how to attack coverages where it's not like, they're in like cover 3, cover 1. It's, single high space here. I know based on the route distribution where I should be going with this football.
Absolutely. And to your point on the scramble drills quickly, I didn't see a lot of scrambles that I felt like were rushed.
Mm-hmm.
They were the play, either the concept didn't play out the way that they expected it to, or the guys just didn't get open. There were not a lot of, my internal clock is ticking too fast, I'm going to get out of here. There was like, a couple. Already as a rookie, but some of those other quarterbacks, when they scramble, they are hitting that escape hatch the first sign that they feel a bull rush coming on a tackle. And that's a very different discussion because you're sacrificing potentially 20 yards for 4 to 8 yards, depending on what you're doing. I found his decision-making in general very strong there. And I think the game moves more slowly for him than it does for Jacoby. I think Jacoby's a very natural thrower. And when he knows what he sees, he can put it very accurately all over the field. But I don't think he's great with those post-snap stimuli the same way that Drake showed that he already is getting. It's already improved on as the season progressed.
Great point. In the pocket feel like I know we both, behind the scenes gave Drake a lot of crap for that Zach Sealer when he tried to get over him. It was like, that's the one thing you were like, we never see this from Drake. Like, he never goes out of the back of the pocket, right?
Right.
That's something you hate to see, and you see a lot from young quarterbacks, and it's just not a part of his game. But other than that one play against Zach Sealer, I thought he was fantastic. So we're going to stick in the backfield and also talk more about the offense and defense because this could be the Drake Maye show if we wanted it to be. But first, quick word for our friends over at PrizePicks. Be right back.
PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. And all you got to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. So run your game all season long on PrizePicks. They now offer Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. And the second half of the basketball season is officially here, and the race to the playoffs is heating up on PrizePicks. So don't miss your chance to cash in as the league's best fight for playoff positioning. You think LeBron James will get more than 24 points? You think Giannis will get more than 35? Cook up those hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season. All you got to do is sign up on the PrizePicks app today, download the app, and use that code CLNS. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game.
All right, brother. Now sticking to the backfield, Ramondre Stevenson, good back, tough circumstances. Now, he has not had an offensive line since his rookie season, constantly having to make his own yards, which has taken a toll on his body. And I think his production, where the past couple of years you've seen he's been good and then he kind of goes down and it's been a little bit inconsistent. But again, it's hard to really blame him. What you can blame him for are the fumbles, which just got completely out of hand last season. After it was an issue when he was a rookie, it's popped up throughout his career, but it wasn't damning, right? Especially 2022, 2023. It started to kind of get resolved, but last season was a nightmare. Do you think the fumble issue was so bad that the Patriots should be looking to move on? Or do you think the Patriots just in general, while maybe keeping Ramondre as their top guy and Antonio Gibson as their number 2/passing down back, should be looking to add some kind of youth to this group? Because as good as Stevenson and Gibson are at their best, the inconsistency over the past few seasons for both of them needs to be acknowledged.
Yeah, I mean, we'll speed run these running backs like what I did there. But I mean, they have Ramondre locked up through 2027.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he is there for a long time.
Right.
2027, it might be even longer. It might be through 2020.
It was a 4-year extension last year. His deal wasn't even up yet.
Right. So he's locked in. The big thing for me is that I think he just has a weak grip on the ball. You know, it could be how he's holding it. It's usually 2 points of contact, right? You know, loaf of bread is 1, crook of the elbow, hand is 2, to the chest is 3, and then both arms over is 4. It's usually 2 points of contact for him, and that led to 7 fumbles because he just doesn't hold the. You know, he has a weak grip strength there. Like a lot of guys run with 2 points of contact and they don't fumble like that. Now some of them are because he refuses to go down. Right?
That's what Mayo said a lot last year. He kept being like, yeah, he's one of the hardest guys to tackle in the league, and sometimes that works to his detriment.
Right, exactly. Like you can see that the contact balance is excellent, and he just doesn't go down, but that hurts. I think the big thing is that despite his size, he's not very good in the low red zone, and that's part of the offensive line. That's also part of him. When you are someone of that size, if you don't have an ability to create momentum quickly, you get stood up in the hole, right? Derrick Henry, at times when the Tennessee offensive line wasn't that good, kept getting chopped down in the backfield because he could not create that momentum because he's a long strider. So that's part of the issue, that if he was a little bit better in his athleticism, you might be able to see more in that red zone area from him. But he's a starter. He's a starter in the league that if the ball security doesn't improve, you have a serious issue. And yes, I do think that they should draft somebody. It's a very deep running back class. I think a day 3 running back should be added into the mix. They obviously don't need to play a ton in this year, but I think that adds something there. And it really just depends on what they want to do from a schematic perspective, whether they want to be more zone heavy, whether they want to be more gap heavy. Obviously, you have more insight on that than I do based on just what I've seen and how they built their roster in the past. And considering Josh McDaniels was more gap and Vrabel was more zone in Tennessee, but he's not a third down option. He's a very good pass protector, but the route running and the hands are pretty rudimentary. And he just doesn't offer big play potential, which you need someone who can turn out yards and who can break tackles and can do all the right things. But if you're fumbling and you don't have the big play potential and you aren't a good receiver, there's a limited window. Obviously, he can handle a lot of touches, but that's not necessarily a strength. And then Gibson, I wanted to say I love Antonio Gibson. I love watching him play. His vision is not particularly good. He's better as a zone runner than gap runner by a lot. Yeah, because he has good feel for the cutback lanes. Good feel for the cutback lanes.
He's looking for those cutback lanes.
Yes. In 23, he only had 2 negative runs. Literally 2 in Washington. He didn't have a ton of touches, but he still had, I think, 80 carries and only had 2 that went for negative yardage, period. That number was a little bit higher this year, but he is still one of the best at yards after contact and missed tackles in the league. He was second in both metrics, minimum 100 carries last year. So He has good speed. He's a bit taller, so he can be a little bit, his change of direction is a little bit less than it could be.
Mm.
But the top end speed is there. In outside zone, he's really good. And receiver, he is excellent, right? You see that Memphis receiving background show up in his routes, in his hands. Blocking is good. It's just the durability with him that, you can't necessarily trust that he can handle 250 rushes and not lose some of that momentum. He is a change of pace back and a very good one. And he also has had fumble issues in his career. He has 12 true fumbles. Some of them they just didn't challenge because they recovered it. So the numbers that you see floating around are a little higher than they should be.
Okay.
Like he's actually down. The ball comes out. They recover it. They just don't say anything. So, right, because there's no point. Why would you waste a challenge for 1 yard loss or 1 yard gain from a fumble when he was actually down? But he had 4 as a receiver. So he had 8 as a runner, 4 as a receiver. So, it's just that's just who he is. He's a good player. He's a good change of pace guy, but neither of them are needle moving runners. And I think if you can find someone who can be a value in those mid rounds, that's the type of player you want.
It's kind of funny because the Patriots have the opposite problem in their receiving core. Now, I think the tight ends are a little different story. Tight end and running back are kind of similar, right? Where you have the old guys where you know what you're going to get from them. Tight ends don't turn the ball over. They just kind of lack that explosiveness. But wide receiver is where you have kind of a lot of old heads, right? But also mostly young guys.
Yes.
Plenty of talent. No one questions that they've, got some juice or whatever you want to say. But the consistency, the experience are significantly lacking. Now, obviously, the Patriots do need to go find some kind of number one receiver, whether it's through free agency, which is not looking likely anymore, really wasn't likely to begin with, whether it's via trade or whether it's through the draft. Do you think that there is a future starter in the Patriots wide receiver room? Now, I think Pop, I know you have him as a starter. I also think he is a quality starter from the slot. Yeah, you don't want him on the field as a run blocker or anything, but you can still find ways to use him on first and second down if you want to. But then it gets kind of murky, right? Kendrick Bourne with Josh McDaniels, maybe that's in 2 years off the ACL now. Maybe that's the boost he needs to reclaim his spot. And you got some Z slot types on the roster, but there's no one at X, and you don't really know who it is behind Kendrick Bourne, where if God forbid something happened to him, all right, who's the young guy that's going to step up? So is there a potential future starter in this receiving core? Because I know we were high on the rookies last season, but due to circumstance or what have you, just didn't work out for him.
Yeah. One thing on Pop in the slot is if you do RPO stuff and you do bubbles with him, then you're going to pull that apex defender anyway out of the box. So that's your answer for him.
And that's what Van Pelt did towards the end, like when Pop was like, I am not on the field and I don't know why. Just much more RPO. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even if it's just a fake, right? Like, even if it's not actually you're ever asking Drake to ever read that, and it's just do it, just hand the ball off. Like just doing that just pulls that apex defender out of the box. So then you have advantageous numbers with Pop on the field. So yes, as you mentioned, Bourne was 11 months removed from the torn ACL last year. So he is now over 18 months, which that is the time frame it usually takes to regain athleticism.
Right.
People think that when they get back on the field, they should be about the same. But the truth is that it takes about 16 to 18 months, depending on the person, to regain all of their lateral agility and their explosiveness that they had pre-ACL, which is actually a longer time frame than the Achilles. But it takes longer to get back on the field with the Achilles. Just an interesting little sports science-y note there.
And also appreciate when athletes come back from one season on a torn ACL and are better. Because that shit's insane.
No, it's crazy. Breece Hall was kind of like that. Obviously, he plays on turf, but his foot speed was about the same, if not a little bit better this year. So
funny enough, actually, Harold Landry, according to Next Gen, since he tore his ACL, got under 0.8 seconds and has gotten better every single year. I don't know how that's possible. Eye test doesn't really tell you that, but that's just what the advanced metrics say, and it's objective truth. I don't know. Just
I mean, it's possible that you have to spend more time working on your lower body when you have an injury like that, so you come back stronger. You see that a lot in like professional wrestling, that guys aren't in the best shape. They suffer a significant injury and they come back in the best shape of their life, but they actually are because they don't have time to do anything else. It's only working out and getting back on the field. So there is some potential truth to that an injury can spark some of that in people depending on their role and position. But
That's why I bring you on, man. Those kind of nuggets.
For Kendrick Bourne, I think he is the starting X, in my opinion. Well, there's a very specific reason. I think he's good getting off of press, and I don't think he's good against off at this point.
Because he doesn't threaten vertically enough.
Correct. So he's good at creating space and at the cut when he's attached to somebody, especially underneath. But if they're able to play off and play conservatively, he doesn't have enough explosivity in any direction to threaten them and widen. So he gets swallowed up in man coverage from off. So if you want someone right on that line, I think he fits that bill. But for me, I think Jalen Polk could start this year. And so the results were horrendous last year, right? Like just flat out horrendous. He knows it. Everyone knows it. The film before the catch point tells a very different story.
Let him know. Let him know.
When he faced press coverage, he beat basically all types of competition off the line of scrimmage, whether it was vertically, whether it was horizontally. He was so good relative to what I expected because, everyone said he's a possession receiver. He can't create space. He doesn't get open. He was getting open consistently, and he was able to widen the stem with that guy in his face because he was just playing ball at that point. When he faced off coverage, he struggled to maintain positive pre-snap leverage because he didn't sell it enough. So for him, he was able to do that. And obviously, if there was a guy who was off, if he's playing Z and he gets contacted, he was getting slowed down consistently. He wasn't prepared for that because I think he was just kind of getting into his route, trying to get into his rhythm. But he worked well on the vertical plane. He worked well on horizontal breaks at the cut when he had somebody, in phase with him. He sold his routes well. I was blown away by how nuanced his game was in some of those route running areas. And if the hands and the ball skills come back from that confidence, which we know was a huge strength of his in college, I mean, it was the selling point. it was literally, he is a great hands catcher. So if he gets that back, that's someone who I could see being a legitimate X receiver on the outside. You're not going to threaten with 4.3 speed, but you can beat press coverage off the line of scrimmage and get open. He was doing that early, right? If you remember the play against San Francisco, he created space and he can stack a defensive back. I think that was Charvarius Ward that he stacked. And Charvarius Ward runs a 4.38, 4.4. And he was able to beat him off the line and stack him and create space in a way that you don't usually see from rookies. You didn't see it from anybody else on roster that could consistently do that. So for me, I think I'm optimistic that he could take a huge jump if the confidence comes back. There are a lot of examples of guys without excellent athleticism who have been very good players because of their route running.
Devontae Adams.
Devontae Adams is one of them. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that he's going to be Devontae, but if people remember, people were trying to run him out of Green Bay his first 2 years. He had the dropsies, and he was a second-round pick out of Fresno State, basically in the same general area as Jalen Polk with the same general build, same height, same general weight. And he became one of the best route runners in football through nuance and just feel for the game. And then obviously his hands at the catch point are phenomenal. So, that there is a path forward for Polk. When he got drafted, I thought he was going to be a wide receiver 3, the third best target, maybe a Z, maybe a little bit of X, but didn't see a ton of him facing press in college because you don't. And then this year I'm like, okay, he could be a high end 2, maybe even a low end 1 if things go right. So despite the fact that the results were horrendous, they came in an area that was the opposite of what his strength was. So the arrow for me is pointing straight up if he can just get some strong coaching and get his confidence back. If the confidence doesn't come back, he's done. That's just what it is in football. If you don't have confidence playing football, you're going to fail. That just is what it is. There's a reason that DBs act the way they do. You have to have ultimate confidence, otherwise you can't play football. So
same thing with quarterbacks. Like as much as we all love Tom Brady, you think like Tom Brady is humble off the field for sure, but then he flips the switch and you're like, oh, that's like the real Tom Brady. He's an arrogant SOB, and you have to be because you are going up against the best people at the world in what they do every single week.
Yeah, you need absolute conviction in everything that you do on the field. So, yeah, that's my feel. And then outside of Polk, I don't see a starter in the rest of the group. Javon Baker's athleticism didn't translate for me. I thought he played like a 4-5-4 guy. Even vertically, there was no separation. And I went back to his UCF film. And I was like, why didn't I notice that he didn't create any separation against these guys before? He might have beaten them at the line of scrimmage, but they gained ground so quickly. It's the Sky Moore phenomena, right? He was so good off the line of scrimmage at Western Michigan, and then guys just caught him. And that was MAC level players. So if guys that UCF was playing were catching up to him, that should have been a pretty big red flag. The route running is not there. Great hands catcher, but I just don't think that the processing or the route running nuance is anywhere close. So I think it's a pretty uphill battle for him.
Felt the same way with Jaheim Bell in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, those are guys I was really excited about, and I loved the Flyers. Like I like Javon's tape enough that if there wasn't concerns off the field, I would have considered him in third roundish, maybe even second. Like if teams really loved him, but after seeing what we've seen, it's kind of hard to go back on it. You're rooting for them, obviously, but
right.
The tape is the tape. Now with Polk, he's very frustrating because, like you mentioned, there's so many reasons that he should do better because his weakness last year was previously a strength. And then it's, he was historically bad. Well, so was his situation, right? He literally was surrounded by incompetent coaching, not his fault. Then got to the point where he kind of just was mentally fried, as you expect from young players. Then it was made worse by his own coach, who called him out and said he was having, mental issues, that he's like, I'm not. It was a whole thing, right? So I think that if this is a coaching staff that nurtures him, gives him that confidence, I completely agree. You saw the flashes before he started to get into his own head, especially in that San Francisco game. So hopefully he can figure it out.
Patriots Daily is powered by Gametime, the best place to get tickets to your favorite events. And it's not just sporting events. There are also tickets to shows and concerts as well on the Gametime app. And they have our favorite feature, the Gametime Picks feature. That makes getting those tickets even easier, filtering out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And as you know, NBA playoffs are approaching, and the NCAA tournament is also here. The first round will take place in Providence, Rhode Island. So if you're local and want to get to those games, you could get into Session 1 in Providence for Friday and Saturday right now for as little as $125. And you get to see two games at that price. It's High Point versus Purdue, and then McNeese versus Clemson. So get in on it right now. Head over there to Gametime. That is the all-in price as well, that $125. You got to toggle that on in the app. It's my favorite feature. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Gametime today.
Now, the offensive line, I'm hoping you have a little bit more faith in more players there, because Layden Robinson and Caden Wallace disappointed for different reasons. Caden Wallace got hurt. The whole left tackle experiment was shot in the summer, like before we even got to the end of training camp. He was back at right tackle almost full time. Then he gets hurt, unfortunately, with a really serious injury. It was a miracle he even got back on the field. Layden Robinson, it was acknowledged multiple times last season, he should not have been playing. They said in an ideal world, he would have had an opportunity to learn behind the scenes. That didn't happen, but he did start to improve down the stretch. Also have Cole Strange. Like, you have guys who could fill in at guard, center, but you don't have any proven starters on the left side or at center. So is there anybody on this roster you think has the potential to fill in at any of those spots, or do you think we've maybe seen about what those guys are?
Yeah, I think, well, let's start with left tackle. I think left tackle is pretty open. I think with Morgan Moses signing, that is definitely where Caden Wallace is going to be playing in the future, or it's going to be a true redshirt sophomore year for him, and he'll pick up the right tackle spot next year. That is a potential.
Yep.
Badarian Lowe is not a starter. Very athletic, but not a starter.
Spot starter at best, I think.
He's too. So there's a thing with offensive linemen. He's too long. His arms are too long.
The opposite of the Will Campbell problem. Okay.
Yeah. So he has 35 and 3/8 inch arms, which that's pretty good, right? Like that's legit length, but it means that his punch is slow. It's wild, it's slow, it's not as strong. It's the same reason that you don't have high bench press reps from guys with long arms, because it's a lot more weight to move, it's a lot more to do. You see the long punch and it just chop down, or it doesn't strike in the right spot because it takes longer to get there. So the guys with the shorter arms have much better use of hands usually, because it's much quicker. They can get beat because their reach is shorter, but they are able to keep their hands tight, and that's why shorter arms can work on the interior pretty well, right? Because you can just punch and jab and you're working in condensed space. But for him, his arms are too long. So he has all the athleticism in the world, but because his hands are late to trigger, he lacks force, they're not very well targeted, they get into his chest and they bull rush him. And he doesn't have the anchor because of that, because he doesn't have any leverage whatsoever. And that's why he gets pushed back.
And also, why last year or 2 years ago, those two-hand punches just killed him, because it was all he knew how to do. And it felt like anytime he went up against somebody who'd been in the league for any amount of time, they just waited for him to shoot his hands. And they were like, all right, bye.
And that's the other thing, right? Two-hand punches are terrible. So you need good poise. But if you don't have the ability to get the hand out quickly, you don't have a good feel, you're not going to get there. But so left tackle, they need to figure it out one way or the other, whether it's a veteran, whether it's a draft pick, first or second rounder. But to me, I think if one offensive line spot is a weakness, I'm okay with it, considering how they were basically playing four guys plus an injured Mike Onwenu, who were playing at a level that was below adequate, below replacement level. Like they were marginal, they were backup level players at four spots for the majority of the season. Layden Robinson, to me, looked good at left guard, to the point where I think he could be a fringe starter this year with potential to be even better. So in the run game, I thought he was already at a starter level, at a quality starter level. He was top 15, top 18 at left guard in the run game. Not at right guard, at left guard specifically. Didn't think the comfort was there on the right side whatsoever.
Why is that? Because didn't he play right guard in college?
Sometimes it's just a feel. There's so many things, right? Like Caden Wallace played right tackle, he played left tackle a little bit. You see guys move around, and sometimes it's just handedness. Maybe he's just more comfortable in his set on the other side. Whatever it may be. Or
I'll ask him.
Yeah, it could also be the alignment of the defensive line, because you're going to have fronts shifted over to the strength.
Yep.
So he might have guys that he's be able to reach more versus guys that are more over him. So that could be. So there's a few different things that could be going on there, but. I thought he was good at both gap and zone schemes. So he's a scheme versatile player in that regard. Good ability to reach, solid sustain, good job positioning himself, quickly reaches assignments. So he was he showed good athleticism. The pass sets were the thing that I thought would be the biggest area, and that's all hand placement. Like if you look at his lower body, when his hands are good, he's good.
Great feet.
Yes.
Great feet.
He can be a little bit stiff in his hips, so he'll pop up a little bit in his pass sets, but it's really a matter of when his hands are right, he shows a good anchor. So that was really encouraging, because sometimes you see guys who have their hands right and there's just still nothing there. But you see that he can reset versus bull rushes. He's good versus, or he's at least above average against swim, club, spin moves, because he can match with his feet. And then he's a little bit late to pick up stunts and twists, which, communication issues on the offensive line, time on task, everything.
Especially when you're playing different spots. The Patriots weren't playing the same guys at center or tackle. So literally when he was in there, it was just a matter of who was healthy that week, depending on who was on the left and right of him.
Yes. Yeah. And then I think his initial quickness, I think the stiffness in his hips to pop up right. I think he just needs to get a little bit better in his set to maintain a little bit better knee bend. Because if he gets popped upright, you're going to lose some of your core strength. because you don't have that lower body strength as your anchor to help reset. But I mean, across the board, it was pass blocking, and then it was his getting into his pass set were the only areas that I deemed at replacement level for him. So on the left side, on the right side, I think it'll be more. But like in my opinion, he should be the front runner to start for left guard, because I think literally with just refining his hands, he is a legitimate good starting left guard already. And then you asked about somebody else. I think I liked what Ben Brown did. I think he has a little bit of potential when he has more chemistry with those around him. But he was a solid athlete, better zone blocker than gap blocker. So that's a zone blocking guy. Good independent hand usage in the run game and the pass game. Inconsistent base, can lock his hips a little bit, allows speed across his face. His anchor isn't great, so he's a little bit more finessey than he is power. But I think in general, like, I liked what I saw. I really think it was time on task, and the fact that he got thrown into the fire. I mean, he got signed off a practice squad and started the next week.
It was incredible. On what most of those reserves did last year was pretty insane.
Yeah,
even Trey Jacobs, like
yeah. I mean, like that's unfathomable to be able to do that just like that. Just poof. Oh, you have never played in the system before. You don't know anybody here. You're starting at center.
In a West Coast offense where you're the one calling. I think he said somebody lied to me because I asked. I was like, would you just have Nwenu like make the calls? Because he's been here. He's the one who's like, he would know. And somebody's like, oh no, that's not gonna happen. And then I think Ben Brown wound up saying, like, yeah, I was just listening to Big Mike the whole game. The first time when he hadn't even been there for a whole week.
Yeah, that's crazy. So it's like, like there's something positive there. I think he could end up being potentially a fringe starter. He's at least a potential starter. I have him lower, but I do think Cole Strange, with time on task, could potentially be a fringe starting center. I don't think he can be a starting left guard, because right now, like, you see the excellent athleticism. He doesn't generate much push in gap plays at all. It's just the strength isn't there. The sustain isn't there either. So, he doesn't hold on to those guys, but very good lateral movement. Can do the reach blocks, can do everything. The one-on-one pass rushing, he doesn't have the core strength to handle it. I think that's his biggest area, because his punch and his hand usage in general are very strong, and it doesn't matter in those one-on-one situations. So if you move him over to center and you take a smart dude who plays hard and does all the right things, and you give him time to learn that position, he can survive on an island, 5 or 6 times a game at center in one-on-one reps, and he can help on double teams. And I think that's the area that you see that, and he can pull out into space. He can be out there on screens. He can be out there on, trap. He can do all sorts of things. But I don't see a path forward for him at left guard, despite his health, right? Ignoring any health concerns that he may have. I don't see a path forward at left guard, but I do see a potential solid starter at center if he can get a feel for the position. He had very few reps at center, and he just didn't have a good feel for it. His vision wasn't there. You could tell he looked uncomfortable trying to figure out what to do. What do I do with my hands? It's like that's what he was like, trying to figure out where to go when he didn't have someone over him. So I there's potential there, but I'm a little worried.
I'm not gonna lie, after hearing that, like, during this conversation, I adjusted Layden on my depth chart. I moved him. I had Cole as the default just because that was a veteran thing. I wasn't really sure.
Yeah.
But you convinced me. I moved him up and I bumped him up to a fringe starter. Before that, I had him one rank lower. So how would you feel, hypothetically, about a left side of Layden Robinson at guard and Will Campbell at left tackle? I know you haven't done a ton of draft stuff, but like, I'm sure you know about the Will Campbell discourse. Yeah. 32 and 5/8 inches, obviously well below average. Not just that, but also a pretty small wingspan to the point where he would be it doesn't matter how good he is, the technique, the athleticism. Athletically, he's an outlier, but size-wise, massive outlier, even for guys who've had success. So like you mentioned, shorter arms can be an advantage, and he is excellent with his hands, very quick punch, good recovery, all that. Would you be comfortable with him and Layden Robinson as Drake Maye's protectors on the left side?
I'd look at the pick and I'd go, okay, we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
Because I don't think, based on what I've seen, left tackle is his final destination in the league.
Mhm.
I'm not as concerned with the length as I am with the lower half stiffness. He's a very good athlete forward. He's very fast, but I saw some stiffness in his sets that let him get beat to his edge,
Mhm.
and he's going to potentially have to overset in some cases, which is going to expose his chest to speed to power, and he doesn't have the length to match that. So I think there's some concern. I think as a run blocker, he should be fine. I think it's the pass blocking that you're going to see some issues. And with the guys that they have on roster, do I want someone who might be a fringe starter at left tackle and a good starter at left guard being forced to play left tackle for years? No. I'd rather get a true left tackle, someone that's a little bit safer. Maybe not at 4. Maybe you trade down. Maybe you do something else. But like, he is the type of person that could succeed in the league because he has all of the characteristics, the work ethic, the character, the leadership. From that perspective, I would love him.
Mhm.
But I'm just not sold on him being a left tackle that is a needle moving player, which is basically what you need to take at 4 if you're going to draft someone like that.
As usual, we're on the same page. Like, I have made myself sick trying to figure out how to make Will Campbell work for this team. I love the person. I would just want him. He is the best offensive lineman in this class all around. And I'd love for an offensive line that has gaping holes at multiple positions to have someone like that. But when you have a guy like Armand Membu, it's like, all right, would I rather bet on him being able to play on the other side, but still being a tackle? Armand Membu is a tackle in this league, one way or another, versus Will, who maybe he's a right tackle, but we know he's probably not a great we know he's not a great left tackle.
Right.
You need a certain level of physical upside to be great at any position in the NFL,
Yes.
because when you go up against someone who's just as smart, just as well trained, then what's the difference maker?
Yes.
I'm better than you physically, right?
Right.
So I've tried so hard to figure it out. It just doesn't work, unfortunately. Now, with Armand Membu, again, he's got enough arm length. He's got great athleticism. You talk about, Will Campbell was in the SEC, only let up no sacks or whatever. I don't really care about those numbers, because when you're talking about 1 to 2 sacks, I can show you 5 plays with Will Campbell where he was less than half a second away from his quarterback holding onto the ball and it being a sack. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, sacks are a quarterback stat, period.
Exactly. So with Membu, it's like, okay, if he let up 2 sacks, but he still was a very good tackle in the SEC, I'm good. But that's going to be an interesting conversation moving forward. I would like to move on to the defense. I'll condense this because I've had. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
I just wanted to say, because I watched him quite a bit. Caleb Jones, who they signed to a futures deal, is one of the hugest human beings I've ever seen. He is 6'8" and 7/8 inches tall.
Okay.
370 pounds with 36 arms. So he was on the Packers practice squad, and then the Patriots brought him onto their practice squad. I think he was on the practice squad the whole year. He is huge. He literally went into a 3-point stance, and he was standing next to a left guard, and he made the left guard look like he was 5'6". I was laughing so hard. He's too long. 36-inch arms, 86 and 5/8 inch wingspan. But he was just really fun. Basketball background. He actually boxed out a guy climbing to the second level. He turned and boxed him out to clear space. I'm like, I've never seen someone try that move before, but he's athletic enough that he can do it. He's too big, but fun player nonetheless. Just to give you an idea of the depth I went on the depth chart to look at these guys.
That's pretty good. And when I hear the numbers, it sounds insane, but honestly, in person, you can actually see it. Like, absolute monster. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to become a member of Patriots Press Pass on YouTube to get full access to videos like this and much more really fun content. I cannot wait for you to see it.